If you think of yourself as physically unattractive or aesthetically unappealing in any way, then you need to watch the entirety of this video, because this is the no bullshit guide on how to actually make yourself more attractive to women. With this guide, I intend to give you not just a better understanding of how attraction actually works on a physical level, but map out a few options and aesthetics that you can choose. More on that later. Yes, you heard that right. This is the how to run game properly if you're ugly. And if you're wondering what qualifies this beautiful chocolate man to give you any advice on that, then look no further than Exhibit A. What? That wasn't enough? Okay, hold on. How about Exhibit B? Am I making myself clear yet? As long as you have a firm grasp over a few principles, building an aesthetic that works for you, that is highly attractive to women, is not only easily attainable but very realistic. This is the guide where I show you how to do just that. And my goal with this guide is very simple. By the end of it, not only should you have a better understanding of how attraction, especially on the physical level, actually works, but you understand how to use the new principles you learn to become more aesthetically appealing to women. And yes, specifically in person, not just online. Now, with that said, I do need to give a few disclaimers. Number one, this should go without saying, but this guide is not a magic pill. It's going to take a significant amount of effort from you to make the significant changes that you need to make to achieve success in this area. And the worse off your starting point, the more work you'll need to do. Disclaimer number two, you will be required to make some significant changes and hold yourself to some significantly life-altering commitments in order to see results in this area. So for that reason, I have to say that everything I say in this guide is for purely entertainment and educational purposes only. I am not your doctor, lawyer, financial advisor, etc. I'm going to be speaking purely from my own personal experience and everything I know with regards to my field of expertise, which is going to center heavily around evolutionary psychology and social dynamics, especially in human beings. You have to take full responsibility for whatever life-altering decisions that you decide to make after watching this guide. And my final and, in my opinion, my most important disclaimer, despite the fact that I may reference these communities throughout this guide, I am not a member of the black pill or red pill community. I am a pickup scientist. Get it right. Which means that because of my very different field of study and paradigm, my methods will be drastically different from anyone else's. If you find yourself having a hard time bringing yourself to believe that what I'm saying is true and tested, then you are more than welcome to go out there and do your own research and testing. Whether you choose to follow up on that or not is up to you, but I assure you, I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Now that I think about it, I'm gonna add one more extra disclaimer. Everything you're about to learn in this guide is not a substitute for good game. Yes, as you will learn in this guide, looks do matter to a certain degree, but they are meant to be strategically used as a way to boost your game, not be your game. Alright, now that we have all that out the way, let's go. It's time you found out how looks actually work. And in order to do that properly, we need to start out with a quick lesson in evolutionary psychology. Yes, we're taking this back to caveman days. So back in caveman days, when man wasn't as sophisticated and civilization wasn't a thing, the two most important things that mattered to us as a species were survival and replication. For the sake of the longevity and the continuation of our species, prioritizing survival and replication and nothing else were paramount. Because of how harsh the environment early man had to endure was, survival and replication weren't exactly the easiest tasks. And yet, within all the trials and tribulations that they had to face at the time, they had to figure out in the midst of all that how to survive well and long enough in order to successfully replicate themselves, but then also replicate successfully enough so that their offsprings have a higher chance of survival. Because again, longevity of the species. But holding the burden of responsibility for both survival and replication is a heavy workload. So nature, or God, or the creation force of the universe, whatever you believe in, decided it would be a good idea to separate both imperatives across two different genders. The male of the species, aka the caveman, with his bigger skeletal structure, more dense muscle composition, and a considerably higher production of testosterone, at least more than his female counterpart, would be tasked with the burden of responsibility for survival. Another way to say it is that the caveman represented considerably higher survival value than the cavewoman did. which meant that the cave woman, along with her biologically patented uterus, was tasked with the burden of responsibility of replication, because cave women and their uterus are the only things that can produce offspring. At this point, it should become very clear that the caveman and woman could not exist despite of each other. Because in order to meet the biological imperatives of survive and replicate, the caveman would have to find a way to get the cave woman to offer him some of her replication value, and the cave woman would have to find a way to get the caveman to offer her some of his survival value. And then on top of that, despite all men being created equal, some of them just rose above others. Yes, even within these harsh times, there was a hierarchical structure. And some men were better hunter gatherers than others. And it was those early men that the early women sought out the most. Those cavemen were by far the most desirable to the cave women. And those particular kinds of cavemen were by far the most sought after by the women. Why, you may ask? Because the cave woman, being opportunistic in nature, realized that aligning herself with the most competent man in her tribe was her best chance of survival. Think about it like winning the biological lottery. If she were to be able to demonstrate her replication value correctly, and were to somehow manage to get this man, this highly competent man, to emotionally invest in her, then she would be able to share in his survivor value, which means she's fed, taken care of, and protected from the elements and other would-be attackers. And of course, that would trigger her on a biological level to give in return her replication value. And that's pretty much how attraction works. Basically, everything that a man finds attractive in a woman are indicators that she has the ability to bear children. And everything that a woman finds attractive in a man are everything that indicates that the man has the ability to protect her and keep her safe. So that's all cool and dandy for cave people, but what does that mean for us? Well, basically, it means that despite the fact that we have evolved past cavemen, our reptilian brains haven't really changed that much. On a biologically impulsive level, we still respond to the same exact triggers. Which means, till this very day, what men find attractive in women and what women find attractive in men hasn't really changed in millions of years. Deep down, we're all just still wild animals trying our best to survive and replicate. And our tactics and strategies, aka the things we look out for in order to choose who to do the surviving and replication with, has not really changed either. See, back in caveman days, women got really good at identifying which men were the best protectors. And their methods for finding out was not complex at all. They simply used their eyes. And they looked at the body of every single man in their tribe to identify which one was the strongest. As you can see to the side of my floating head over here, this is a really ripped caveman, at least by today's standards. But you see, what we so conveniently interpret as a jacked guy in this day and age is what cave women would look at back then and identify as a competent man. The large hands for grip strength, the big strong arms for lifting, the strong shin bones and calf muscles for mobility, the visible abdominal muscles to indicate very little body fat, which helps with mobility and strength and speed, the deep set eyes, brow ridge, and high set cheekbones to protect the eyes during combat, the large healthy facial hair to indicate the presence of a balanced nutrition, which was a very subtle indication of competence, because a balanced nutrition, especially back then, was very scarce a resource. So having access to that kind of resource is very impressive. Basically, cave women used the caveman's aesthetic as his resume of sorts. A way to figure out if in his lifetime he had built enough competence to be able to protect her. And the more masculine and angular his features, the more competent he was. Because here's the next thing that's kind of important to note here. Cavemen weren't born looking like this. Nobody is. They're born as tiny, soft, vulnerable babies. But because of the harsh environment that they found themselves in, their bodies adapted and changed to be able to carry the workload of surviving that environment. So if you really think about it, the cave women were really smart for using the men's bodies as a way to figure out how competent they were. Since the human body does most of its development and changing during puberty, looking out for strong masculine features that indicate the proper saturation of testosterone during puberty became the subtle signs and cues that women, the cave woman in particular, would use to figure out the survivability of the man she's trying to assess. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, All those same subtle signs on a physical level that indicated that the caveman had high survivability are the exact same features we use in this day and age to gauge attractiveness. V-taper build, big strong arms, visible abdominal muscles, deep set eyes, brow ridge, high cheekbones, strong jawline. These are all the exact same features that cave women all those millions of years ago looked out for in potential mates. And that is what leads me to the first principle of how looks and attractiveness actually work. If you thought that attractiveness and looking good was all about having the perfect facial symmetry and the perfect angles, you're wrong. Attractiveness, as a man especially, comes down to one simple thing: how competent as a hunter, gatherer, and protector you are. And specifically, how the way you look is an indicator of your survivability. Survivability meaning how well your body has done to adapt to harsh environments. So, in other words, your attractiveness comes down to how much suffering you've endured. Plain and simple. And how much suffering you've endured on an environmental level during puberty specifically. Because, like I said before, that is when the majority of your growth and adaptation is happening. So, then, if that's the case, then the solution to looking good and being attractive to women is fairly simple. And it can be summarized quickly into: make sure you do things during puberty that set you up for caveman like protector, hunter gatherer type of success by the time you're older. Go out of your way to put yourself in a harsher environment. Play sports, do exercises, lift weights. Put a heavier workload and stress on your mind and your body will naturally do its job and adapt to all that stress by carving itself into the kind of man that can withstand all that workload. As someone that grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, one of the toughest places to grow up in the world, I can tell you from personal experience that starting young is key. And anyone that grew up under my circumstances with the right kind of information got a massive head start. Okay, but hold on now. What if you don't look like this? What if you've already gone through puberty and you come out the other side looking more like this? Or this? Or this? Well, let's talk about that. You see, if for whatever reason you didn't have the proper testosterone production during puberty, and then on top of that you either didn't take on good habits or you took on bad habits, then it's going to generally affect the way you look. And by the way you look, I'm sure you know by now that I mean how much of a competent protector you look like. If you didn't take on the right habits and lose the wrong habits during puberty, then you're not going to look like you can protect yourself, much less anyone else. And by definition, she's not going to find you attractive. I want to make something here very clear. It's not that if you don't look quite like a testosteronic man that you can't or are not willing to protect yourself or anyone. But you have to admit it is a great indicator, at least on an evolutionary and biological level. Which is why whenever you try to make the attempt to prove to a woman that you have the ability to protect her, aka you try to seduce her or pick her up, she's not going to trust your survivability. So what is she biologically incentivized to do? For the safety of her and her future potential offsprings with you, she's biologically inclined and incentivized to test to see if your ability to protect is for real. And she does that by becoming the threat and seeing how you handle it. She becomes a physical and social embodiment of environmental stress just to see how you handle it. And that is what we in this day and age conveniently label as shit tests. Except when you don't look like a protector, you get even more shit tests. In fact, they may feel a little harsher than just tests. For my conventionally unattractive guys out there, does it feel like women treat you worse? Does it feel like you never really have a chance from the start? Does it feel like there's a higher barrier to entry for you and not for guys that say look like me? Well, that's because there is. That's literally what's going on. In every woman's mind, you're either a protector or you're not. But it's not simply black and white. It's more like a sliding scale. And a lot of men are a lot further down the scale and a few men are further up the scale. But somewhere along that protectability scale, there is a barrier to entry. And you need to cross that minimum point for her to take you seriously as not just a man and a sexual entity, but someone that she can respect as being her protector. And as someone that's been on both sides of this barrier to entry, I can tell you from experience The treatment you get from women here and the one you get from women over here are night and day. Now, I want to make something very clear here. This particular scale, this barrier to entry, is universal. You might be tempted to think, well, it might be different for every single woman. For some women, it's higher. For some women, it's lower. In my personal experience, I've come to find that's not the case at all. There is a universal barrier to entry for every woman on this planet. I wish I could give you a specific number like a weight or a height or a certain body mass index or body fat percentage, but unfortunately I can't because there are so many variables involved. However, none of those variables actually have anything to do with the woman's actual preferences. Because believe this or not, all women have the exact same preference. You're probably not going to believe me if I say this, and I don't blame you if you don't. But the truth is that all women prefer and want the exact same things in men. And yes, all women. I'm going out of my way to generalize here on purpose, despite how offensive it may inevitably be for some. And the reason all women have the exact same type is very simple. Men who are considered protectors have only one type of look. There is a way, especially in the eyes of women, that a man who has the ability to protect looks. And if you do not fit that mold, you are making game harder for yourself for no reason. Now you might be telling yourself, I don't necessarily look like that. I don't fit that mold, Jason. What do I do? And to you I say, bullshit. You see, it's not that you don't look like a protector. It's that you're not demonstrating protectability. And that's a huge difference. You see, I kind of led you on a little bit in the beginning. The point of this guide isn't really to make you look better, if that's what you thought I was going to do here. The real mission of this guide that we have to accomplish here is to make you understand that you can use your looks as a means to demonstrate your ability to protect. Because it's not necessarily your looks themselves that make you attractive or not, but what your looks and aesthetics actually convey and represent. I'm going to teach you how to make your entire body scream, I can protect you from the world, to women. But first, let's understand a few concepts. You see, you don't look like you've been through any significant amount of suffering. And because of that, she can't trust that you know how to persevere through the kind of suffering that you'll need to persevere through when you have to protect her and her offspring. So not only is she biologically incentivized to test you to see if you really can protect her, but she has to put you through 10 times the amount of tests that she would give the guy behind me right now to make sure that you are the protector you say you are. Because again, you don't look like one. It'll be like if your friend had a medical emergency and you called 911 for the paramedics to get there as soon as possible. But instead of EMTs, a bunch of plumbers pulled up. As grateful as you may be for their quick response, you would be armed to the teeth automatically with questions about their qualifications and ability to resuscitate your friend. Because you would want to make sure that they're qualified for the job. Especially since they don't look like they are. Do you get it now? Women, as mad as you may want to be about how picky and choosy they are, have every right to be skeptical about your ability to protect. Especially when you don't look like a protector. You look soft, frail, weak, and gooey. Nothing about you indicates protectability. Which brings me to the second principle you learn in this guide. All you need to be attractive to women is to demonstrate protectability. This is why, as a practitioner of the pickup arts, I can't help but give kudos to those before me. This man right here is a man I've referred to before as the white Jesus Christ of pickup artistry, and his name is Eric von Markovic. But some of you may know him simply as Mystery. And he helped not just to revolutionize but popularize the pickup arts, along with the creation of his own techniques that became widespread. I'm sure you've heard of the word negging. He came up with that. Unfortunately, most people don't even know what that word means or how to use it properly. But I don't want to talk about negging right now. I want to talk about the other one that he made even more popular, which is peacocking. Yes, Mystery came up with the concept of peacocking. And I bet a crisp $20 bill you have no idea what peacocking is. Because if I were to ask you right now, you would probably say something like, peacocking is just wearing a very interesting item of clothing to attract women. Which, if you don't get it by now, is false. That is not what peacocking is. Peacocking is not for attracting women, even though that is the byproduct. And it is not to stand out or be unique. That is a popular misconception even within the pickup arts community. Peacocking is much more subtle and much more powerful than you realize. And it's a concept that I need you to understand right now so that you can understand why it is you may not be seen as aesthetically pleasing to women. Please keep an open mind and pay very close attention to this next part. Mystery got the concept of peacocking from, well, peacocks. And peacocks are, for the most part, flightless birds in the animal kingdom that have very colorful feathers. Well, that's not entirely true. Only the males of this species actually has colorful feathers like this. The females are actually like really gray and boring looking. But the males, if everything goes right during puberty, end up growing really colorful feathers on their tail like this. And over time practices the ability to show off this tail and dance with it in a mating ritual. The way the male makes sure that its feathers end up looking this immaculate for the females it's going to impress later is to have a balanced diet and access to a lot of hard to find nutrients. But then there's a third part that no one ever talks about, which is the male actually has to stay alive long enough to be able to show off these feathers. Just think about it. Flightless birds are not predators in the animal kingdom. In fact, the most colorful ones, like these, are prey. Because of their fairly large and visible size and multicolored feathers, they're easy to spot from afar. So they're going to be the first and most visible target in the flock for any predator that's trying to come at them. Which means, by definition, any peacock you see in the wild that has really large feathers and very immaculately colored is a strong indication that not only does that peacock have access to rare to find nutrients, but has done an immaculate job at staying alive that long. That peacock has its survivability on 10. And the proof it has to the female of its species that it is a good survivor and has great survivability is the fact that he's right there in front of the female dancing with them feathers. You see my point? Ladies and gentlemen, that right there is the very fundamental basis of where Mystery got the concept of peacocking from. Not just from the fact that male peacocks are willing to show off, but the fact that the male peacock showing off like that is a detriment to its own survival. And ironically, being so reckless with its survival is what makes it great at survival. A direct example from the book The Mystery Method by Eric von Markovic about how peacocking works is the one where he talks about having fake cigarettes with his friends in the club. You see, he thought it would be funny to go around in the club and just smoke fake cigarettes with his friends. And he's frank about the fact that he was actually experimenting with another different game concept at the time, which is using props and items and pieces of jewelry to convey affiliation. As a quick example, if you and your boys all walk in and you're all wearing the same ring, you subtly demonstrate to every woman around there that you are a part of a group that is bigger than yourself, and as a result have access to people that'll lend a helping hand if you need to, say, fuck someone up. Which makes women feel safe, right? But I digress. So Mystery's in the club with his buddy smoking these fake cigarettes, right? And all of a sudden, a stunner comes up to him and asks him, hey, why are you smoking a fake cigarette? And then all he did was shrug his shoulders and go, well, it's just for shits and giggles. It's no big deal. So she goes, oh, okay, and walks away. And right there it hit him. He had just missed out on a very good opportunity to spark attraction with a beautiful woman. So it became very clear to him that if that were to happen again, he had to have some kind of a prepared speech. Not too long after, same club, same fake cigarette prop, another stunner walks up to him and goes, hey, why are you smoking fake cigarettes? So he leans in closer to her and says, because I despise smoking. Then he takes a drag of the fake cigarette and puffs it in her face. And that right there perfectly demonstrates how peacocking works and how to use it effectively. You could say that the fake cigarette was a way to peacock. It was a conversation starter and an excuse for a woman to talk to him first. Those are very true. But those were the secondary purposes of that. The primary purpose of any peacocking prop is to elicit a shit test, and this is very important. When you come out to the world doing, saying, or wearing something that is counterculture, or just outside of the box of normalcy, whether it be the way you dress, the way you speak, the things you talk about, body art, piercings, etc., it is the natural inclination of people, especially women, to attempt to put you back in the box. Test your resolve to see if you can actually stand 10 toes down on what you say, believe in, or do. And in some ways, as weird as it sounds, this is a good thing. Because being counterculture, or just outside of the societal norm in any way, shape, or form, in a weird way of thinking about it, is an indication or projection of strength. It's your way of trying to show the world that you have the ability to be unapologetically you without any remorse or feeling the need to back down. So naturally, women have to test to see if you really are about this strength you're projecting. She has to find out for herself, are you really as strong as you claim you are? In the late 90s and early 2000s, Mystery became really popular mainstream, especially because of his reality TV show he had at the time called The Pickup Artist, I believe. And everyone knew pickup artists as those weirdo white boys that were going around wearing the flashiest, most unnecessary clothes. I mean, just look at the picture behind me. How ridiculous does Vampire Boy look right now? The piercings, the top hats, the goggles, the black painted nails, the fake cigarettes. If you've read his book, The Mystery Method, then you know why it is. The point is, everyone thought these crazy sons of bitches wore these ridiculous articles of clothing because they wanted to stand out and be different. And that misconception is carried on all the way till today. But in reality, they wore all these articles of clothing because they knew what would happen when they did. Which is the same thing that happens whenever you do something that is a little bit out of the social norm. People, especially women, are incentivized to test you. They make an attempt to try to push you back into the social box that you're so clearly trying to escape, and leaves you with two options. The first, which is do what most people do and apologize for your behavior and take off the top hat and wipe off the black on your fingernails, blah blah. But the second, which is what Mystery and I recommend, is you stand 10 toes down on your goofy decision making, whatever that decision making might be. And in a weird modern human way, you've just done the same thing that peacocks do. You've demonstrated your ability to survive by putting yourself in a hard to survive situation and getting out of it. That is what peacocking is. That is a huge reason why your look is not working for you. You haven't been peacocking. Let me explain. Remember what I said about cavemen and how all the different features on their body were indicators of their survivability? The exact same applies to you in this day and age, except you're not putting yourself in any kind of hard to survive situation. And that's not really your fault. We live in an easier to live in world. As long as you don't go too far out of your way to go out of the box that society has outlined for us, you don't have to find yourself in tough to be in situations. And that's why you don't get no bitches. Do you get it now? The vagina you want is on the other side of the risk you're trying to avoid taking. And women are biologically designed to go after men who are willing to take these risks. In his book, The Mystery Method, Eric von Markovic outlines 5 different attraction switches. And really, after all these years of continuously reading that book, I can confidently tell you that that's just his own way of trying to say, this is how you demonstrate that you have caveman-like survivability to a woman in this modern day and age. And those switches are pre-selection, protector of loved ones, believer in something greater than oneself, leader of men, and successful risk taking. But in my opinion, there's only one real attraction switch, and that is successful risk taking. None of the other ones compare. In fact, in a weird way of looking at it, all the other attraction switches kind of point towards successful risk taking. To be a protector of your loved ones or a leader of men, you need to be a successful risk taker. Your willingness to emote will come from your ability to assess risks. And being pre-selected by women is just the indicator that other women have seen you take risks successfully. I hope you really understand this. Successful risk taking is the very fundamental core of what it is to be an attractive man. Risk taking ability, the ability to have balls. Okay, now how does this translate to your physical appearance? Let's go back to that caveman. In order to gain every single one of these physical protector features, he would have had to take many types of tremendous risks, and successfully so. I mean, my boy is literally like what, 7, 8% body fat? Back in the time where there was no access to information about diet and nutrition like we have today, bro wasn't aware of what creatine does to the body. He didn't have access to a gym. The only way it could get like that back then is if he was successfully getting into fights and winning against saber-toothed tigers. So literally everything about this man you see here, from A to Z screams successful risk taking. Which brings me all the way around to my third principle. The key to improving your physical appearance dramatically is demonstrating successful risk taking. To be quite honest with you, the vast majority of men crack under that kind of pressure. And then there's a very small group of men that don't. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. What I'm really trying to tell you here is if you want women to pay more attention to you, the best way to go about doing it is to instigate a shit test. And there's no better way to do that, in my personal opinion, than to be counterculture. Now, granted, you don't got to go Kanye levels of counterculture. That's not necessary. Hell, you don't even have to go my levels of counterculture. I'll be overdoing it sometimes, honestly. But there are definitely adjustments you can make, specifically in your looks and aesthetics, that'll force women to fire a shit test coming your way, which will then give you the opportunity you're looking for to show her just how good a protector you are by standing up to and passing her shit test. By far, one of the best things you can do is hit the gym. Going to a traditional gym is fine, but picking up a sport is even better. But the best by far, in my opinion, is learning a martial art. Because along with sculpting your body, you also get the benefit of learning how to physically defend yourself. And what better way to demonstrate that you are a protector by not just looking like one, but actually being one? Okay, this next piece of advice is going to be specifically for my Asian friends out there. The main plague with being Asian, especially on the phenotypical level, has to be having softer, more feminine features. Which honestly aren't bad, but too many clusterfuck together can make you appear softer and weaker. Which is why I personally highly recommend the use of tattoos and piercings to masculinize your body. Plus, there's the added benefit of being counterculture along with it. I don't care who you are or how soft you look. Tattoos can add an automatically much needed layer of masculinity to your aesthetic. Combine that with a rock solid body, some really strong masculine body language, and a cold, smoldering stare. Like, really try to minimize how many times you smile on a daily basis. And what you have left is someone that looks like they can be trusted to protect. Here's something controversial I'm going to say. If you're black like me, you don't really need tattoos. Because let's be honest, depending on where you live on this planet, being black alone is counterculture enough. So don't forget to use that to your advantage. Personally, I don't have any tattoos, but I would love them. I'm honestly just waiting for them to figure out how to make white ink actually heal more visibly under dark skin. Once they figure that shit out, it's over. I'm getting all kinds of quotes all down my left arm. It's going to be crazy. The next thing I'm going to advise you to do is jewelry. Granted, there's a point where you overdo it and it becomes corny, but I'm not talking about that. For the most part, it should be minimalistic. If you do not own a straight gold chain, what are you doing with your life? Have you not noticed yet that everyone that gets bitches has a gold chain? Shit, I got one on right now. Add chains and rings to your collection to make you look more interesting. If you can pull it off, have a story behind each piece of jewelry.